Hello, hello, hello. It's rookie fantasy drafting on the Big D podcast. Before I bring in the night special guest, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. We can see all my content. I like Justin Thomas to win the PGA Championship this week, so go bet on him. Also, check out the Big D podcast on Spotify and Apple. So joining us is the host of the Full Press Packers. If you want some Canadian Football League, and I guarantee you he's got some XFL or USFL coverage in there, my buddy Kyle Snedman. Kyle, did I forget the all the other football leagues?
Well, that's the thing. I stick strictly to NFL and CFL. I don't really watch or do any fantasy content for XFL or USFL. However, if you are looking for that stuff, I suggest you go to goingfor2.com. I do contribute there occasionally, a lot of times writing DFS stuff. Last few years, I've been writing Yahoo DFS content for Going for Two. I know that's a platform that doesn't get a lot of exposure to, so I kind of like to just put that out there and know if anyone's looking for that platform and trying to find just some content about the weekly Yahoo DFS contest, and feel free to check out the articles on goingfor2.com during the season. And like you said, CFL, but I do a lot of redraft, dynasty, salary cap, contract leagues, a lot of stuff fantasy football related. So Full Press Fantasy Pod, as well as the Full Press Packers Pod, and a couple of live shows with the Going for Two Live Network. So thanks for all that, Dylan. Time for letting me know everything, and thanks for having me on. I always enjoy talking with you.
No, thanks for hopping on. By the way, Kyle, I bet you love the half point PPR on Yahoo compared to the full point on DraftKings, right? Really annoys us when we want to use Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara.
That's true. It does seem like that they're the top end prices for those pass catching backs tend to not be too extreme. Although when Derrick Henry's price last year early in the season got quite inflated, and to me, I'd rather half or full than zero PPR. That's for sure. But outside of having some form of PPR, I can take and be really happy and content with all sorts of different scoring settings. And that's kind of what I love about football. And a lot of like the flavor of talking rookie drafts is for myself is just how many of these rookie drafts that I personally did were just so different in terms of league size, scoring settings, even just roster requirements. So that's part of the fun puzzle of fantasy football that we get to play.
Yeah, so Kyle, you've done more rookie drafts than most anybody I've known. Like, how many rookie drafts have you done?
Lifetime, or just this year?
No, in the last couple of weeks since the draft.
Okay. Yeah, because going back to 2015, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have done a lot more than me. But so I did one that was I think we did the weekend before the NFL draft, or at least that's when we started. So I think we through 4 rounds of that rookie draft, we ended up finishing a couple days before the NFL draft. But I've done 4 since then, since the NFL drafts happened, 4 different rookie drafts myself. And then I've also have a bit of info on some of my co-hosts on the Dynasty Gambit, for instance. That's the Going for Two live show we do, and we talked rookie drafts, and so I got to share some of the drafts as well. So I got a bit more information than what I've just done myself. But myself personally, 1 pre-NFL draft and 4 rookie drafts since.
Yeah, so rookie draft, just like the NFL draft, involves 2022 draft picks. So as in most fantasy leagues, it seems like running backs, whether it be Dynasty or whatever, Dynasty, Superflex or whatever, running backs are so critical. And in the 4 drafts that I see here, Breece Hall, the Jet rookie, is the first guy in all those drafts. Doesn't surprise me. I mean, be honest, is Breece Hall the only rookie you consider 1-1, or are there other guys you considering?
Well, yes, if I'm personally drafting, I would have Breece Hall as the 101. And I guess if you gave me enough drafts, I might, give me 10 rookie drafts to do, and I had the 101 in all of them. There'd be a lot of bad teams or a lot of teams I traded up for, but I might on the 10th one or make a different one, or on 9-10, take a couple of different players to diversify. But yeah, I think Breece Hall seems to be what I've seen in all the drafts I've been. He's been the 101, and out of everything my co-hosts and all the drafts I've kind of seen witness to personally in terms of seeing the draft boards, I think only one time I saw Kenneth Walker go 101. So, and I really like Kenneth Walker compared to Breece Hall, and so I might put, while I'd say Breece Hall for sure the 101, I could also make the argument that it's not just Breece Hall tier 1 in terms of prospect. It seems like that's how it is kind of in drafts, where he's the 101, and then from there the 102 is not so obvious. It'll be different in a lot of different leagues. But I feel like talent wise, Walker's right up there, and I couldn't necessarily fault anyone if they only had that one pick, couldn't find a way to trade back to go with their wide receiver one, if they really truly believed in a wide receiver one that had that much talent. So it is possible, but again, mostly see 95% of the time, if not more, Breece Hall going as the 101.
So why does Breece Hall make the most sense at 101? Is it because he's a dual threat running back? Yeah, of course, the Jets have drafted Michael Carter from North Carolina last year, but it seems like every team's using multiple running backs. I mean, other than maybe a Derrick Henry, you don't get that bell caliber running back now.
Yeah, certainly none of these guys seems like they're going to offer that immediately, but especially specifically Hall and Kenneth Walker both have the potential to maybe do something like that. And I think with Hall, it's the production. And I looked at, I think it was about 30 or so running backs, a lot of which were drafted here, some went undrafted, and out of all of them, even Pierre Strong at a small school in North Dakota State, where he could just rack up the yards against poor defenses, Breece Hall had the most scrimmage yards per season of this entire class. And there's a lot of really productive players like Isaiah Spiller, for instance, but Hall kind of trumped everyone just purely on a production basis. And that was in part due to what you said earlier, Dylan, about the pass catching role. So, scrimmage yards, I think, is important. That's why I specifically said that, because the combination of not only his efficiency on the ground, but how much of a threat he is catching the football. And then I think the other thing that really solidified it was the relative athletic score, a 9.96, the highest running back in this class. So another thing where he's the number one in a really important category of athleticism. How can he maximize the plays when the holes do open for the offensive line, and he can get that open space? Can he make defenders miss and really gain those extra yards and really make the big play potential happen? And we love that for fantasy, a long touchdown run, not only the 6 points, but if you're going 30-40 yards, it's not just a simple, okay, get a 5-yard touchdown and get the extra half point. You're getting almost you're almost getting 50% of the touchdown scoring on a run. I mean, if you run 30 yards, that's what you're getting there. So the long playability seems really possible with Hall's potential. And then the first running back selected in the draft, although Walker went shortly after, and Walker had pretty good, certainly the athletic score, 9.23, I believe. It was still in the top 10 of this class, but not quite to where Hall was. And then you can argue like better landing spot, Jets, Seahawks. If you argue in either direction, I don't think either stands out as that much better. So then it really all comes down to, tape wise, what do you see in these players? Who do you think one is clearly better than the other? And I had actually Walker ranked 1 in this class, and Breece Hall ranked 3rd, and pretty close score. And then kind of a little bit of a tier gap after Hall to the next group of guys. But so even though my initial evaluation said Walker, everything else points towards Hall. So I think it kind of makes it the obvious 101, or at least RB1. And then because there's no obvious wide receiver one, it kind of also then naturally lends to Hall being the rookie 101. And like you said, running backs go high in fantasy drafts, and rookie drafts especially especially if there's not a large group of running backs that you really want to take in the first round. I'd argue there's only 2 running backs worthy of being top 12 picks, and that is Hall and Walker, which also pushes them up to not just be top 12 picks, but top 5 picks in most rookie drafts, and in some cases 101, 102 in rookie drafts.
Does Kenneth Walker's lack of receiving upside concern you? Because, I mean, yeah, he was a great runner at Michigan State, but he really wasn't much of a receiver, unlike Hall, unlike James Cook from Georgia.
Yeah, there's quite a few. And I know this is something to credit to Zach Reed from a podcast called the Dynasty Dummies. And he did this study, and the threshold he was looking for was 20 receptions. And there's a decent enough correlation between the running backs who hit 20 receptions at least once in college, one full season of 20 receptions or more. And it correlated to them be translating a lot of time to at least one 30 reception season in the NFL. So just kind of showing that it does, it's a stepping stone to kind of get to where you need to in the NFL. And Walker's best season last year at Michigan State, his only season at Michigan State, 13 receptions. So he does miss that threshold. Unlike guys like Hall and Spiller and Cook, they had seasons with 30, 40 receptions. So easily kind of showing that. And it does concern me, but I think the bigger concern with Walker might just be the offense. Is that an offense that will allow him to produce a lot of touchdowns? The Seahawks, not a very efficient team, really, whether it's running, and they have been incredibly efficient passing, but that's been because of Russell Wilson. I don't know that there's much secret to that his talent has really elevated that team to where they can be a high scoring offense, even with kind of low volume. I'm not sure that's the case. So I think the lack of touchdown upside might be more concerning. The Seahawks never really throw much to their running backs, but they do give them a lot of opportunity, a lot of carries. And Kenneth Walker fighting against Rashad Penny, Breece Hall fighting against Michael Carter. Frankly, on the surface, Penny's only there for 1 year, but they also did spend a first round pick on him. They have seen him give him the rock. So arguably it's a bigger hurdle to get over than Hall has to get over Michael Carter. But I still think they're fairly comparable. So, which is why I think again, Hall, I'm kind of growing a bit on one particular receiver, but I depending on the league, I'd consider Kenneth Walker at the 102, but I think it does get to a range where the scoring settings, the roster settings, so in terms of how many minimum at each position, would really kind of sway my decision on who'd be the 102 if I had it. But I think no matter what the scoring settings would be, if I was drafting, I'd take Breece Hall 101.
Maybe the most intriguing running back in a rookie leagues could be James Cook, because to me, there's a lot I like, especially as a receiver. But A, Buffalo throws the ball. You've got so many mouths to feed. Josh Allen could run the ball himself for a touchdown. B, you've got Stefon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox, and don't forget the said running back in the backfield who was a key target in Buffalo win the AFC East last year.
Sorry, what other running back? Singletary, you mean?
Yeah, Devin Singletary.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I for some reason I thought you'd named him, but then I realized you hadn't named him. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have so many Singletary shares, and maybe that's almost skewing my vision on Cook. But the truth is, I'm not seeing much of a difference between Cook and Rachaad White. And before the draft, I had Rachaad White as my RB3, and I still have him as my RB3. But Rachaad White getting third round draft capital, I think it was a top 100 pick, I believe, but I think it was in the 90s. I don't think it was a comp pick, but the Buccaneers drafting at the end of the third. And so I wouldn't consider him in the top 12, but I also then wouldn't consider James Cook, because I still like Cook better. Everything profile wise kind of leans towards White. Receiving numbers, I think they both had a 40 catch season in college. So while that's Cook's best skill set, that's also arguably White's best skill set. So that kind of neutralizes each other. White was far more productive, even if it was just one season. Didn't really do much before last year with Arizona State, I believe it was, but still got over 1,000 scrimmage yards, and it really showed that he was capable of handling the workload on the ground often, and leads to think, okay, maybe better chance of having the touches near the goal line and some good touchdown upside. It's really what chasing, and I more hesitant with that with Cook. And then the relative athletic score, Rachaad White, his relative athletic score was almost as impressive as Breece Hall. I believe it was the second highest in the class at 9.8. I think it was a 9.87. It was something along that nature. And the RAS is measured 0 to 10. So a lot of things and scream towards White. And I didn't have really great tape grades on either White or James Cook. I know contact balance is a big thing I look for. Again, I'm looking for goal line backs, touchdown upside. So the way I sort of view it kind of hurt both of them. So it also means I can't also just rely on that tape. You can kind of look at the numbers and the metrics, kind of pointing all that. The only thing that I've seen that puts Cook ahead of White is the draft capital. Second round for Cook, third round for White, and there I think is I think it was a 30 or no, I think it was more than that. There was about a 40 or 50 pick difference between the two. So that, while significant, I also would argue maybe White's in the better situation. Not so much because Leonard Fournette's there, that probably hurts White arguably more than Singletary hurts Cook, but it's, I think, the quarterback. And this is dependent on Brady being there longer than maybe 1 year perhaps, but Brady, more propensity to dump down to the running back, give the running back a lot of reception opportunities, much more than Josh Allen. So that is the one thing that worries me, is while I think the Bills would rather Josh Allen not run the ball as much, maybe not running the ball as much just means more rushing attempts for Singletary. They're trying to get the ball out of his hands completely and just get him to hand the ball off, as opposed to, okay, dump down, but if they give him the chance to dump the ball down, maybe he tries to hold it and go deep, or just run and take off himself, and that competitive tendency just takes over. So I don't know, maybe I'm drawing too much of a narrative, but I still have White ahead of Cook. And while I think even at the 201, 202, anywhere in that range. And I mean, I did spend the 202 on White in one draft I'm looking at right now. So 14 team league though. So that would have been the 16th overall pick. And that's kind of where I've gotten 3 shares of Rachaad White. And so me having him at RB3, because one thing I've seen in drafts is James Cook, to your credit, Dylan, does seem to be the third running back popping into the first round, and the RB3 going off in a lot of boards, but it's not always the case. And frankly, it's rarely ever Rachaad White. I've seen other guys. I've seen drafts where Tyler Algier is the RB3, somewhere Dameon Pierce is the RB3.
Isaiah Spiller.
Yeah, that's right. Isaiah Spiller, especially pre-draft, that would have been really common to see. I don't know if I've seen that post-draft yet, but that wouldn't shock me. But I still have Rachaad White as the RB3, and I've been getting him. I've gotten 3 shares of him through my 5 rookie drafts. One was before the NFL draft, but I still got him at the 16th overall pick there. And it's been that range, 16 to 18. And that's where I'd prefer to target Rachaad White, James Cook, and all that second tier of running backs. That I think between Hall and Walker, I'd have a big group of wide receivers. And then, especially in Superflex, would definitely have Kenny Pickett in that tier as well. Even in single quarterback, I'd probably still, default to Cook and White and a couple other running backs ahead of Pickett, but that'd be tempting just because he is really the only one that really got the draft capital to kind of seem that he's going to be the guy.
So you mentioned Kenny Pickett, and one quarterback taken in the first round of last month's draft in Vegas, that being Pitt's Kenny Pickett, who gets to stay home with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But does that mean that Kenny Pickett is automatically the top rookie quarterback in fantasy option? Because you've got Malik Willis with the Tennessee Titans. I'm trying to think, who is the quarterback?
So Desmond Ridder
with the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm trying to think of the Ole Miss quarterback at the top.
Matt Corral
with the Carolina Panthers. Does that mean, is Kenny Pickett still the top quarterback, rookie quarterback in fantasy leagues, or one of the other guys potentially? Because to me, I'm hearing more and more rumors about how the Tennessee Titan players are unhappy with Ryan Tannehill.
Well, yeah, and I suppose I do wonder what kind of opportunity Malik Willis gets. I think there's a big risk with Desmond Ridder and Matt Corral, especially, where if those teams, the Falcons and Panthers, are so bad where they're drafting in the top 5, top 10 again, the temptation to take quarterbacks from next year's class might be too much to where those guys just get drafted over immediately. I guess if the Titans choose to move on from Tannehill, unless he completely implodes, because he's been pretty good and they've been competitive. And I mean, they were the number 1 seed last year. And while less than desirable playoff performance, the 3 interceptions are really bad, but Tannehill still made some plays in that game. The 1 touchdown throw to AJ Brown, perfectly on time, on the spot. Great catch by Brown to make it, but that was literally right to his hands, perfectly in stride. So great timing, great accuracy. And I think it was the only touchdown pass thrown in that game. So Joe Burrow didn't throw any touchdowns in that game, but I mean, the team still won. So that was obviously what mattered there. But, Tannehill still showed some things, and to at least think that they're not going to be awful. Like the Titans aren't going to be drafting the top 5, top 10 next year in all likelihood. So it at least protects Malik Willis from that early rounds, but who knows how many quarterbacks. I guess the Titans in theory could still draft over him if someone falls to the second round that they can't, that they really just can't pass up on. Suddenly he's taken a full round ahead of Malik Willis and maybe given the opportunity. So that there's, I guess, that little bit of risk, but it seems like outside of Pickett, Willis does seem to have the least amount of risk that he'll get drafted over. So yeah, and I mean the skill set, the rushing ability, we covet that in fantasy, does make it tempting. But I still, and again, I had Willis as my QB1 before, but the draft capital is kind of inescapable. I think what the NFL is telling us is these guys aren't ready, because even the Titans and Falcons and Panthers, they took those 3 guys, but still passed them over twice before doing so. So while they like them and were willing to take them, they weren't sold on them enough to take them in the first round. So it does speak to maybe a inability on those quarterbacks' part to come out and immediately contribute, which maybe isn't the worst thing for fantasy, but it's also how long are they waiting on rosters? You don't want Jordan Love. And I mean, the one I kind of remember like rookie drafts where Jordan Love was going usually 3rd round, and definitely a lot later. These Willis, Ritter, and Corral, especially going a lot later since the NFL draft, but still I see them in a lot of super flex drafts, rookie drafts, still going in the 2nd round. So it's a little bit more risk than what people are spending on Jordan Love. Maybe none of those guys have Aaron Rodgers in front of them. Nothing even close. I mean, well, I like Mariota, but I think Tannehill actually stands out as probably the best quarterback out of that bunch. So in a sense, Willis also maybe has the least amount of chance to start this year. Could easily see Matt Corral starting over Sam Darnold at any point this year, whether it's due to injury or just simply they're tired of Sam Darnold's poor play, and Matt Corral can't possibly be any worse. Maybe that same sentiment applies to Mariota, but not to the same extent, I think, as Sam Darnold. Mariota's shown success. I mean, he's won games. He's gotten one season anyway, the Titans to the playoffs. So Ritter does kind of have that hurdle to go over. And while Trubisky's also been to the playoffs, the Steelers spending a 1st-round pick on Pickett kind of does say a belief in maybe his ability to play immediately, compete for the job. I think, I don't know what Dylan, do you think Pickett has a legit chance to compete for that starting job this year? Or are they redshirting it and giving it to Trubisky?
Be honest, I think it's 50. I think it's either 50-50 or 60-40. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if either guy started in Pittsburgh. I mean, I think Pickett, I mean, a lot of people said before the draft Pickett was the most pro-ready quarterback. He doesn't offer the greatest upside. Like, he doesn't have a big arm, but I feel like Pickett can play now. He can pick up an offense. Played under more of a pro-style offense, some of these other guys. So I feel like Pickett can pick up the NFL offense better. Plus, in Pittsburgh, you've got Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool to get a really good tight end and Pat Fryer move. So, Steelers are not going to put Kenny Pickett out there and feed into the walls. They're going to run the ball and win with good defense. Some of those other quarterbacks might be playing because the starting quarterback just flat out stinks. I mean, the Carolina Panthers are going to be sick and tired when Sam Darnold throws another pick 6.
And I mean, like, none of those offensive lines are great, although the Steelers may be certainly on the weaker end, might be arguably the worst out of those 4 teams. But outside of the line, you said it, with all the weapons, I'd go a step further. That's probably the best coaching staff and organization to be behind. I mean, they've had 3 coaches in the last 50 years. I guess 50 years, really. I mean, Chuck Noll was hired in the 60s, right? So this is
Chuck Noll, Bill Cal, Hall of Famer, and Mike Tomlin, probably a future Hall of Fame coach.
All Super Bowl winners as well. And so it's an organization that's patient. And I mean, they haven't spent a first round pick on a quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger, and they kept him his entire career. So it does seem like them taking Pickett, while it wasn't nearly as high as I believe Ben Roethlisberger was a top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken. But it's still the commitment of a first round pick on a quarterback. And even if he doesn't, even if, like you're saying, Trubisky gets the start this year, but I legit think it is 60-40, maybe even close to 50-50 that Pickett might start. But I do think it's open competition. Like, no one's being handed anything. So the best quarterback will get it. And maybe that is Trubisky right away. And it might be one of those things where if Trubisky wins the job in training camp, it's his the rest of the year, unless he they may bench him for a game, give Pickett the start, but Trubisky's going to start every game. You've earned it in training camp, and it'll go through. We really don't know how Tomlin's going to handle that. Is it whoever wins? I'd assume it. If Pickett wins the job in training camp, he'd have to be completely awful to them turn away from him. So it's one of those where it's probably easier to start Trubisky as well. But if Pickett's clearly better, he's probably going to get it, though. That seems like Tomlin's that kind of straightforward guy. But it is, if Trubisky wins the job, is it you've won the job for the year? And even if we have to bench you for a game, even if we pull you for a game just to give the other guy experience, you're going to still start every game as long as we're in the playoff hunt. If that's how winning and that's kind of what you're striving for, and you'd assume Tomlin's going to go at least 500 because he's been doing it even with Ben's awful quarterback play the last few years. Or is it Trubisky's won the job, but if Pickett improves during the season and somehow proves to be the better option, like if they get to week 12 and they're seeing stuff in practice where they say, okay, if we saw this before week 1, we would have named him the starter. If does it get to that point and then they go to Pickett? Like, I don't know. I don't know how Tomlin's going to handle it, because he hasn't had to handle it before. I mean, he wasn't there during Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season, so he never had to handle Ben as a rookie or ever that transition. So that's going to be, I guess, a new challenge for Tomlin. So, but even so, that's probably the best spot for any quarterback to land. And it was in the first round, 2 rounds above anyone else. If Willis or Ritter, I really like those two, especially for their running ability. If either of those guys went in the second round, especially early second, and it made it closer, okay, they're only separated by maybe a dozen or so picks, or maybe 15, 20 picks at most. That's maybe more interesting. But third round capital, that's a little scary for those quarterbacks. So kind of like I was saying with James Cook, Rachaad White, outside of Pickett, I don't want to take any of these quarterbacks in the first round of rookie drafts. And I'd even say the first half of the second round. Like, to me, top 20 rookie pick on any of these other quarterbacks outside of Pickett, it would be really scary proposition. As much as I liked Willis and Ritter's profile before the draft, I wouldn't. I so far haven't had any shares, and that's partially because when I'm getting to the second round, I like a lot of the wide receivers. And early second, I going after those running backs like Rachaad White and James Cook if they fall there. But certainly the mid to late second round where I'd consider quarterbacks, there always seems to be a wide receiver I like that falls.
Speaking of wide receivers, it seems like there's different wide receivers who everybody takes in rookie drafts. I mean, to me, it seems like there are 2-3 consensus top wide receiver picks. The first one, first one to me seems like Trayvon Burks, the Arkansas rookie with the Titans, only because who else do the Titans have besides Derrick Henry on offense? Let's see. Because
I just took Austin Hooper in a startup, so I hope Austin Hooper produces this year. But Robert Woods coming off the ACL tear. But yeah, it's you're right. It is an open depth chart. Does the same logic apply to Drake London? Because outside of Kyle Pitts, who could basically be Atlanta's Derrick Henry, which almost makes me vomit to say that. I shouldn't Derrick Henry's done so much in the NFL. Kyle Pitts should not be compared to him. But that idea that like the identity weapon, I don't know. I think Drake London's opportunity is wide open, but to me, I've got those two as 1-2 at wide receiver, and they'd be the only 2 receivers I'd consider taking over Kenneth Walker.
Agreed.
And it would be what I was mentioning earlier, Dylan, was, if you give me 10 rookie drafts where I have the 101, I'll take probably Breece Hall. I'll say maybe 7. I'll give me one Kenneth Walker just to diversify, and then I'll take a share of Burks and London each. But yeah, I get the sense that the big body types, the high ceiling performances, especially it seems like with London with the deep ball and Burks' yard after the catch ability, kind of looks like it to me is putting them in my eyes, production wise and value wise, kind of above. And London got the top 10 capital, so I'd say it's those two for me. But my tier of top rookie wide receivers does end after 3. So I knew. So do you think Burks is the one? Is that kind of what you're kind of playing?
Yes, and even though he wasn't the top guy, he was the 1, 2, 6 wide receiver taken.
Yep.
It seems like Burks is the top rookie option only because of who's not in Nashville anymore. No A.J. Brown and no Julio Jones. When you look at like Garrett Wilson's got Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, and the running backs. Chris Olave's got some guy named Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry.
And Alvin Kamara.
And Jameson Williams is coming off a 20 ACL and probably won't be ready until the fall.
Yeah, and I think out of all those first round wide receivers, like first round in the NFL drafted, I think he got the best quarterback in Tannehill. Frankly, and it was funny I was saying earlier, right? Like Tannehill seems like he's better than Mariota. Out of that group, Mariota might be the second best quarterback. And maybe that's just because I'm a Jameis Winston hater. Most people would probably say Jameis. But even at Jameis at his ceiling, what Tannehill's kind of shown efficiency-wise over the last couple of years, Burks got the best quarterback out of these first round NFL receivers. I'm pretty convinced of that. So that would also be a notch in that favor. I have seen Burks go as the wide receiver. In drafts I've been, there have been 3 different receivers to go as the wide receiver 1 in rookie drafts. And sometimes as high as the 102, sometimes that's the 103, depending on where Walker's going or where a quarterback's going. But it's been either Treylon Burks, Drake London, or Garrett Wilson. And that would be that. Garrett Wilson's my 3. So that's my top 3 for rookie wide receivers. I believe that should be like that. Those 3 alongside Kenneth Walker should be the first 5 picks in rookie drafts, regardless of format. I don't know. How do you feel? Like, do you think that's fair to say those top 5, or is it for you, Dylan, maybe a clear top 3 where Burks is so clear the wide receiver 1 and it's only him and the 2 running backs, and then it's a teardrop? Like, how do you view it?
I think it's probably top 3 to me, only because I like Garrett Wilson's athleticism, and I feel like in today's NFL, I mean, we'll find out this year whether or not Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, and Corey Davis can all get passes, because eventually the Jets have got to figure out whether Zach Wilson can play.
So anyway, what I've seen kind of in rookie drafts is depending on, because I've seen like Jameson Williams go with the 103. And everyone will kind of have their wide receiver that rises up. And I'm in a couple of Dynasty group chats, Dynasty patron chats, Dynasty and Chill and Dynasty Trades HQ. And I'm only calling them out because I do really appreciate those podcasts for their content. So like anyone to just kind of love Dynasty strategy, check out the Dynasty and Chill podcast. And there is while I did mention Patreon and there's paid content, there is a free podcast available on most podcast platforms. So Dynasty and Chill and Dynasty Trades HQ. And what I've seen in a lot of those chats, and the big benefit is just seeing people talk about their rookie drafts and so much exposure, hundreds of members and hundreds upon thousands even of rookie drafts happening. Just so some of the things I've heard is like 103, you might see a James Cook go, or Sky Moore, or Jameson Williams, right? So, but for the most part, it's been Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Drake London, and in kind of whatever order. And so some people are like you, Dylan, where it's Treylon Burks as the wide receiver 1, clearly. Others are like me, where it's, okay, is it a clear tier of 3? And it's interesting, but one thing I've seen in every draft, it seems like it's a clear cutoff of top 9, where you've got and again, and the guys of all these drafts are super flex, but like in super flex drafts, I haven't seen Kenny Pickett go outside the first. He's been in the first round of every super flex draft. And I think it's just going as the QB1 now since the NFL draft. And of course, the 2 running backs, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker. You also do have James Cook, like you were saying, that your positive love for him is shared by a lot in the community. And he seems to be the only other running back I've seen go in the first round since the NFL draft. Again, you might have a few, like a Dameon Pierce, Tyler Algier, Rachaad White, Isaiah Spiller is an RB3 in the class, but it's because Cook's falling and those guys are going early second more than anything. But Cook seems to be the one that might rise. So you've got maybe 4 players there that are going in the first, but certainly Hall, Walker, and Pickett. And then after that, you've got about 9 wide receivers that I think should all be worthy of being in the first round. We've already mentioned quite a few of those names, but again, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. I already referenced Sky Moore, but also the other first round NFL wide receiver that I know we don't like as much, but because that first round capital is still seen a lot of times go in the first round, Jahan Dotson, you have Christian Watson as well, George Pickens. But that cutoff after Sky Moore, it seems like those are the clear 9. So again, it would be the Hall, Walker, Pickett, and then from there, 6 wide receivers. And that's again, Wilson, Burks, London, Williams, Olave, and Sky Moore. Like all 9 of those players I've seen go in the first round of every draft. And then again, you'll have a Watson, Pickens, Dotson, any of those guys rise up into the end of the first round. James Cook, again, maybe a running back, but it's a lot of wide receivers in the first round. I got to say, more than half of the first rounds of rookie drafts usually tend to be wide receivers. And even in the second round, it gets to be a lot there. And I think they go fast and heavy. And I think that my approach to a lot of rookie drafts I've been is, that those ranges first and second round, and unless you've got the pocket tier where you can get the running back at the right spot. So Rachaad White in the early to mid second, James Cook in the early second, or if you have a 101, 102 and get Hall and Walker, kind of ignoring the running backs there and trying to get wide receivers through those first 2 rounds, and then hit running back heavy in the 3rd and 4th rounds. Because I think there are a lot of good running backs that went in the draft and even some undrafted that landed in interesting spots that give them opportunities with some interesting profiles. So certainly in the 3rd and 4th round, that's where I kind of want to take a lot of late shots, because a lot of where I don't want to necessarily invest in is late day 3 wide receivers, because those guys have so much to kind of overcome. Wide receiver depth charts are usually really crowded. Whereas, I'll name Tyler Algier kind of as the guy that really raised for me, outside of James Cook, of course, to be the RB5. We've kind of talked about the top 4, but Tyler Algier really comes up as the RB5 for me, simply the opportunity with the Falcons. I liked him. I had him at RB13 before the draft. So it's, only 8 spot difference. But the chance with the Falcons and his particular skill set, I found his best attribute was his contact balance. So does kind of lead to, goal line back, maybe some touchdown upside. And it seems like that's something that the Falcons are lacking. That plotting running back that's really good in short yardage between the tackles and can grind out some touchdowns. So I think Algier has quite the opportunity. And, 5th round wide receivers, I don't know really any that have like clear path to opportunity. I'm pulling up the draft recap now. I don't have 5th round wide receivers. Oops. Sorry. But like a lot of the wide receivers that I want to target fantasy wise are 2nd, maybe 3rd round at best. And even some 2nd round wide receivers we don't want to take, like a Tyquan Thornton who went in the 2nd round, and like he's going 3rd, 4th round, sometimes even undrafted in some rookie drafts. But there really aren't very many 5th round wide receivers that I think are worth taking. I guess Khalil Shakir might be the only like day 3 wide receiver that really stands out. Simply opportunity with Buffalo. And it seems like he was someone that should have gone earlier than he did. Like it was a surprise that he lasted until day 3. So we also liked the profile, but outside of Shakir, like I'm mostly sticking to wide receivers taken in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And when it gets to late in rookie drafts, really just targeting as many running backs as possible. I've got a lot of different shares through 5 drafts. I don't have any copies of any player except for Rachaad White, 3 shares of Rachaad White. So 60% through those 5 drafts. And that includes a rookie draft where I traded out all my picks. So it really is like Rachaad White in 3 out of 4 drafts where I actually had picks. And it was all in that 2nd round range. So that's where I took him. And then a lot of shares of different running backs all throughout the 4th round. Sometimes 3rd rounds with like Tyler Algier, Keontae Ingram, a guy I really liked before the draft. He was my RB4 before the draft, falling a little bit going to the 6th round with the Cardinals. But again, I'm more willing to take running backs who got day 3 capital as opposed to wide receivers who got the same type of draft capital.
How about in one of your leagues where you traded like the 108 pick for an established NFL player?
Yeah, I've done this in a few drafts actually, where I've traded out picks. One in which the rookie draft hasn't happened yet, so still have no idea what those picks are going to be, but just kind of wanted to bail out. But for something, this happened during the draft, and it's a salary cap contract league, so there's also a little bit of an extra wrinkle to this trade that does work in my favor. That does help me kind of moving forward. But essentially, at the 108, it was right after that tier. I would have been after the 5 wide receivers that went in the first round that we want to draft. So Jahan Dotson was available, but I really didn't want to take him at 108. And, RB3 Rachaad White was way too early. And because it's only a 10-team league, the quarterback scarcity is lower. And this was not the draft I wanted to take Kenny Pickett in. I actually did draft a Kenny Pickett share in another league, and I can get to that in a little bit, but didn't want to take Pickett there. So then it was really, okay, it's a big tier of receivers. There's really 4 guys I wanted to take, but I also had the 202. So I knew probably a good chance I get one of those guys anyway. So do I want to double up and take, at that point, it would, debating between Sky Moore and Christian Watson, but I would have gone Christian Watson, honestly, even though now I'm seeing Sky Moore go ahead of Christian Watson almost every draft, and probably would kind of make me change my mind a little bit, just seeing how often and like almost unanimously Sky Moore going in the first round. But I didn't really want to take Watson there. I felt like I could maximize that pick more to try and go for it. But still not just get a player, again, salary cap contract league that was on an expiring contract and just get a 1-year rental. But someone was willing to sell me Darnell Mooney, 2 years left, as opposed to a 4-year rookie contract. But the caveat is Darnell Mooney's salary is actually really low, lower than what the 108 would be. The 108's making about $5 million per year, Darnell Mooney, I think it's $3.1 million. So a $2 million in cap savings, which over a $182 million salary cap isn't much, but again, anything that kind of leads in that direction of saving money helps. And so going from the 108, I gave up the 108, got Mooney back. I also got a 4th round pick, the 409. Inconsequential, just kind of throw in just to say I didn't give the pickup straight up for Mooney, but it's, again, rookie contracts. And even if the player doesn't pan out, it was Hassan Haskins I ended up taking at 409, by the way. So, if Derrick Henry gets hurt, maybe there's an insurance backup there. Maybe he's the 3rd guy, but, take a shot, right? That's what I'm saying. Like 4th round, I had a list of running backs I wanted at the end of the 4th, and just kind of where my rankings fell, he was the guy I took. Ty Chandler from the Vikings was also there, but went Haskins. But anyway, trading away Mooney, saw the draft keep going, and at 202, Christian Watson was still there. So I got the guy I was going to take at 108 anyway. So I felt kind of okay. I felt like I really did maximize the pick. Instead of just take Watson, I might have got Christian Watson and Jahan Dotson and double up on 2 rookie wide receivers. But even though I only get 2 years of Mooney, the little bit less on the contract does help me going into the free agency auction. I also have Justin Fields in this league, so the stack, if they work out and they produce well, the stack will be nice to kind of help with the added ceiling. But just kind of getting a player that I think is already shown to be better, even if it's only a 2-year contract, I still have a chance to maybe extend him after those 2 years, and if I can get it relatively cheap, it might not be so bad, and could maybe control him further than those 2 years. But I know that at least not just a 1-year rental. So the context of the trade, while the contract length isn't as good, the salary amount is better, so kind of makes up for it there.
Yeah, and in a league when you're trying to save every nickel and penny, it helps when you get a number 1 receiver, albeit with a crappy roster, though.
I mean, to be fair, my team is not that great either, but one of the advantages I do have going into this free agency period is right now I have the second amount most of cap space, and the person I traded with at the 108 that does now have to eat a little bit more salary with the James Cook, he's the one that has the most. And so, he'd be the one I'm kind of directly competing against. So especially any dollar I can send towards him and save off mine almost counts double in that sense. So that also, knowing which particular manager I made that trade with also kind of helped me in that way.
double helps you.
It's the game within the game within the game, right? It's part of the fun puzzle of fantasy football. There's always an edge to be had.
So thanks for hopping on, Kyle. I'm figuring out how to do these rookie drafts because mean, it's fun to see what these young kids can do now and going forward because who knows? I mean, I'm sure the 2023 drafts just waiting for Bryce Young and CJ Stroud.
And it also seems like a good group of running backs. But yeah, so far through 5 rookie drafts, I've made 1 first round pick. So it's also showing that I'm just not, if I've, like, again, an example with that 108 where I traded it on the clock, or I've traded out beforehand. And funny enough, as much as I didn't like this quarterback before the draft, that only first round pick I've made is Kenny Pickett. So it was a league where, it's funny, this is a league where there's 2 super flex spots as well as the 1 QB spot. So start up to 3. And it felt like this is the league where quarterbacks are the most valuable relative to all these other leagues I'm in. 12 teams. So, the 14 team QB scarcity is there, but not quite like something like seeing this where you can start up to 3. So to me, and I was sitting at the 106 and I actually kind of felt lucky Pickett fell. I felt this was a league where I might see him go earlier. I did actually see him again at sometimes 103. In one league I was in, he went 104. A good friend of mine who I really trust his opinion. And yeah, maybe he's a Steelers fan. I don't think there's much homerism in that pick. I think it was more process of it's super flex. There's no position scarcity anywhere else. Take the quarterback, the first round capital, kind of following that process. And I did in one league where I had the 106. Again, because of the scoring settings, because in this case, the roster settings, the start up to 3 quarterbacks, to me, this was the league where I wanted Pickett. And that's why I was saying earlier in that other league with the only 10 teams, much less QB scarcity even though it was later in the draft at 108, I still didn't want Pickett there. I would have definitely gone wide receiver where that's more of a scarce position. So it's also knowing, again, the scoring settings of each league, kind of how the board changes and what players you're targeting, what players you're aiming for. So hopefully that helps with all the strategy, Dylan. I really appreciate getting to talk about also lots of things, lots of different strategy, fantasy football fun, but especially talking with you. You're so great, and really appreciate you having me on.
No, thanks for hopping on.